So welcome everybody. Today's class will be on designing a sustainable landscape. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today's class will be on Zoom. It'll be about 45 minutes with 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Please enter your questions into the Q&A button, or feel free to enter them into the chat. So Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency is a full-service regional water agency located in Santa Clarita Valley. We provide water to over nearly 300,000 people. We are still in a drought despite the rain that we received in December. So we are asking you to please continue to conserve water, do everything that you can. If you need tips, visit droughtreadyscv.com. And we do have other rebate programs. We actually have Matt Dickens here today. He's going to be talking about one great program. But if you would be interested in learning more about others, go to conserveyourscvwater.com. And there are great landscape resources that you can use in conjunction with the material we'll learn today. I highly recommend you visit our website and pull some of these resources. A great thing to do would be the Water Smart Workshop. If you're a customer, you will get $20 on your water bill credit. And it helps you identify leaks in your home. In the long term, you will save money and water, which is what we need today. Another great thing that we have is $150 for a smart controller rebate, which is a great rebate because most of them are around that price anyways. So you get the rebate and you save water and money on your bill. So all of our classes will be on Zoom through December of 2022. Hopefully next year we'll be back in person. But if you have any questions or would like to contact me, my email is on the screen and I will provide it in the chat shortly. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. All of our classes are posted on YouTube. So if you want to share this class in about a week or so, it'll be available on YouTube. And now we're going to have Matt talk about our new and improved landscape program.
Laura, thank you so much. Steve, good to see you. And thank you for all the participants for joining us this morning and to take a sustainable gardening landscape design class. What a really informative and cool topic to learn about. Again, I'm Matt Dickens, Sustainability Manager. And as Laura mentioned, we have lots of great programs that we offer to help customers improve their water use efficiency, their sustainability, and ultimately to conserve water, save water, and reduce water costs. And also, as Laura mentioned, we are experiencing a drought. Even though we had some really great rains in late October and in December, it's kind of been, it's been feast and famine. We had really great months where we had a lot of water and then other months where it was dry, the driest on record. As a matter of fact, it's been the driest January and February on record, according to some recent stories that I saw, as well as academic literature that noted that this is the worst drought, 20-year drought period that we've had in about 1,200 years. So certainly one great way to mitigate the drought and to improve and make your landscapes thrive during drought is to modify them or convert them from water-thirsty turf grass to water-efficient landscapes. To give you an idea, you guys probably know this, I imagine many of you already know this, but each square foot of grass on average takes about 10 feet of water per year in order to sustain, whereas sustainable landscapes require about 3 feet of water per square foot. Now that of course ranges based off the crop coefficient, but on average with drip irrigation, smart controller technology, and plants with lower crop coefficients, you're going to save over 10 years. You're looking at anywhere from 70 to 100 feet of water per square foot of landscape that you have. So in order to help incentivize customers, what we did is we launched the Lawn Replacement Program 2.0. There's lots of great sustainability features, more economic incentives. For example, we went from $2 per square foot base rebate to $3 per square foot. We also have native plant bonuses of 50 cents per square foot for residential customers if you use at least half of your plants as native, being California native or SCV native. We have more flexibility in the sense that you don't have to convert all of your lawn. You can keep some grass. We just ask that each zone be dedicated to whatever plant is being required. You can't mix and match zones. It needs to be a uniform hydro zone. So, but if you wanted to keep some grass in your front yard or your backyards, go for it. Convert the other zones that are turf to water efficient landscape, and you'll get the $3 per square foot plus other bonuses. We up the drip incentives to 75 cents per square foot. And we also have other sustainability bonus features, including water retention features for terracing or rain gardens or bioswales. We offer rebates for sheet mulching. Maybe Steve might cover some of the sheet mulching components, or at some point we'll add more classes for that. We have rebates for owl boxes, rebates for bee hotels, and rebates for rain barrels if you want to harvest rainwater in those times when we do get rain. So I'm going to drop in the chat just a link to the website so that you guys can, if you want to see about the programs. And we did develop a calculator that you can use to quickly determine the value of your conversion project. Yeah, so with that, we're really excited to launch 2.0 of the lawn replacement program, and our information's on the website, and I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in the program.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time today. So now we're going to go ahead and get started with Steve's presentation. I'm super excited because I'm in the process of, designing my own sustainable landscape. So I can't wait to see what we're going to learn today. So take it away, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Laura. And I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, here we go. So today we're going to talk about sustainability. And what is sustainability? First of all, it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This was defined by the United Nations in 1987. And today we look actually at what we call the 3 pillars of sustainability: economy, society, and environment. So you can look more into that at the United Nations website and find out what is going on worldwide with the issues of sustainability. Today, though, of course, we're going to be talking about your home landscape. And oops, here we go. So steps to designing your landscape. We have 3 major steps that we're going to cover right now, and things that go with that. Step 1, analysis of the site itself. What do you have on your property? What can you do where you can make changes to reduce your water use, provide habitat for wildlife, etc. Step 2, making a plot plan. And this is going to be what we call a bird's eye view from overhead. Step 3 is making an actual plan of your landscape, your new elements that you want to add to that landscape design. Now, I realize that many of you have existing landscapes and you don't have a clean slate. Some of you may have a empty landscape area that you can work with, but we're hoping that you might consider making some changes in your existing landscape, removing turf and making those changes in the area. So we'll talk about that as we go forward. So first of all, let's do an analysis of our site and find out what we have going on there. Taking a look at your home, the structure itself, where the windows face, which way the doors and exit from the home, walkways, the utilities that are on site. It may be that you have right-of-way utility areas that you have to maintain. The architecture of your home itself. Is it a modern style? Is it Asian style, mission style? What type of architectural style do you have in your home that you want to carry on through the landscape design itself? Drainage. How does the water flow off of your site? It's interesting because when homes were built 20 years ago, the idea was to get the water from your backyard out to the street and out to the ocean. Well, we've changed our way of thinking now. Now we want to try to actually keep water on site as much as possible so that it can contribute to the water table. So we look at where it drains to, but we want to try to maintain it on site now rather than running off, because also with that runoff could go pollutants that would make their way to the ocean as well. So to be sustainable, keeping water on site. What type of soil do you have? You know, I do talks throughout Southern California, and the majority of the areas have what we call a heavy clay soil. Drainage is usually very poor. Maybe you have conditioned it and made some changes to it, or maybe you have already decided to install raised beds where you're doing some growing at home, which will help with that problem of poor drainage in your soil. Microclimates, these are the areas in your property where there might be a particular hot or cold area. For example, an area that's highly shaded would be a cooler spot. One that is the south facing or west facing wall is going to be a hotter area. So these little microclimates are important to your design so that the plants that you plant will obviously do well under those conditions. Which way does the sun move across your property? Well, it's moving from east to west, so identify that pattern that the sun makes, and note that the sun is different. The angle of the sun is different in the summer versus the winter. In the wintertime, it's lower in the sky, and we have more shadows that are cast. Whereas in the summertime, it's higher in the sky, we have fewer shadows, and of course it is a hotter time as well. Your prevailing wind, where does your wind come from and blow? Well, you folks, of course, have canyons that contribute to these flows of air, and knowing where those typically flow, we can do plantings to help alleviate problems with this high wind issue on your property. So the topography of your site, do you have slopes? Which way do they grow? Which way do they flow? Water runoff is going to happen here. Maintaining the slopes to prevent erosion, of course, is a high priority. Reflective heat surfaces, things like block walls, large concrete areas. Again, I mentioned that as the sun goes across the sky, these south and west facing walls are going to reflect that light back into your property. So plants planted around those areas are going to be getting double sunlight. The sun is first going to hit the plants, it will be reflected off of the walls back to those plants. So we have to keep that in mind with the type of plants that we actually do plant that can handle those conditions. So on your site then, in this analysis that we're doing, we want to identify which plants and trees we're going to be keeping on site. Again, this is considering you're making a major change in your property landscaping. What is your existing irrigation? Is it a quality system? Is it working properly? Should it be revamped? And of course, Matt was talking about how you can get rebates for changing your irrigation system and be more efficient, and with the time clocks and so on, the smart clocks as well. Natural features. Are there particular interesting outcroppings, rock outcroppings, or other interesting features in your property that you can incorporate into that landscape design or in some way work around? And so it has to be figured into your initial design. Access to the house, pathways, how do we get into the doors that we have, and other features that we have as well. Hardscape, we're looking at driveways, pathways, walkways, things that are permanent, as well as items like pools, jacuzzis, gazebos. These are permanent features that, of course, you want to include in this site analysis. What kind of views do you have from your windows, hopefully in your home, and even in your yard itself? And can we promote those views to their best benefit so you can enjoy them the most? There could be good and bad. There may be some views of the neighbor's home that you want to hide, so we can consider plantings that would do just that as well. Negative elements to conceal, things like those right-of-way, electrical, telephone boxes, and so on that you have to have on your property. Are there ways to screen those that we can do with plantings, boulders, etc.? Construction materials. Well, if you're doing construction, if you have a landscape project going on, of course, you're going to have materials there that are going to be impeding your process until it's completed. So these are just a few things to look at when you are analyzing the site and determining what you have to start with. So as we go forward, step 2, is to draw this plot plan. Remember, looking at a bird's eye view, that means from above looking down on the site. We, of course, want to include the property lines, the house itself, and we're going to see an example in a moment here. That plant material that's going to remain on site, the hardscape features, walkways, gazebos, pools that are permanently on site. Now, or you're going to be adding new features, and it can be added to your plot plan design. And then through this all, with this bird's eye view, we can then analyze the cost that will be for this project and the time that it will take to do it. You know, it may be that you will take this project on in phases and do areas of your garden over time rather than the whole thing at once, particularly if it's a redo. If, of course, you have a new landscape, you're generally going to come in and complete the whole process at once. But I would guess that many of you have existing landscapes, and we're looking at area by area. So in the end, your overhead plot plan bird's eye view will give you a preview as what the project will look like when it's done. So here we have doing this plot plan, the bird's eye view. We want to, of course, include those property lines all the way around. Here's the house. Here is the driveway in this area here. Here's the sidewalk, and then a pathway leading up to the front door. So then we have our open space, and we have a bird's eye view that we can utilize. Now, what I would do is I would make your initial plot plan and make several copies, keep your master, and then start doing some sketches and plotting in some of these items that you want to consider into your design. And of course, we're looking at ways to be sustainable. So we're going to get into sustainable features here in a moment, but these are the initial steps you want to do to design or redesign your landscape. So try to keep it to scale. All these hardscape features then will be here. The softscape material, the plant material that's going to remain will be plotted as well. Where those utility locations may be out here, you might have a utility box of some sort. And notice that we also have the north arrow. This is going to be beneficial to understand how the light, the sun moves across your property and how the light will penetrate for your plants. Okay, step 3. So making this new landscape design, as I said, add your features that you want, any new walkways, planters, patios, the softscape, the new plant material that you're going to include in the design. And remember, we want to draw these plant materials in where they will be at maturity. That means how big will that plant be in 5 years? So we want to draw it into size, what it will be at mature, so that we can not overplant in our property. That can be a big problem, is planting too much material and not enough sunlight will reach the plants and we won't have a healthy garden. So overplanting is a problem, and don't do that. So here's a design that is done by a professional. You don't have to do anything this fancy, but it is indicating here the trees you can see again at full maturity. The other shrubs and trees here grown at full maturity, so that we can see and not overplant, and note that they will be at maturity, have plenty of light to address the property and take care of the plant material properly. You can see here they've indicated the hardscape features, the driveway. They even drew a car in here. They've labeled some of the areas, and I'm going to show you in a minute how you can do a labeling system that will be much simpler for you. So it doesn't have to be an elaborate drawing like this, but it does have to be something that is functional and will work for you and get the message across for a professional contractor, for example, if you're going to be hiring somebody to work for you. There are computer programs that can also be utilized to do some of these designs that are pretty easy to work and pretty inexpensive. You might want to consider that if that's your forte. So here's a design done by an individual here for their home. They have shown here, the house is in this area right here in this corner. They have the driveway in this area here. They have the new areas to be planted indicated by the black line that's drawn around them. So what they've done here is they have set up a way here to indicate the plants on the design using symbols. And they have a key down here where these symbols are located, so that you can simply look at the symbol to find out what the plant is. They have the total number of the plants that will be planted in the area. I don't think that's the plant numbers there, but they have 12 different plants they're planting and indicating where they're going to be on site. So this makes it uncomplicated, simple design, easy to look at without a lot of clutter, yet gets the message across to you and to a contractor that you might be utilizing. Let's talk a little bit about hydrozones. Matt was speaking of this earlier, and let's explain what that's all about. So in your design, we want to consider our irrigation system. And an irrigation system is set up in zones where areas of your property where we have different plantings are irrigated according to their needs. And so we set up the zones on our time clock so that we'll water them properly. Now, it may be that we're using different types of irrigation. It may be some overhead, it may be some drip, it might be some micro sprays. So depending on the plant material as to what type of system. But on this site here, we can see that we have different areas that are zoned. Here we have a California-friendly native plant area back here. We have a turf area, a grass area in here that's going to use the most water, as Matt was indicating. We have things like herb and culinary garden. We have a shade tree patio, which could use perhaps a drip irrigation system. We have California-friendly plants that are going to be low water use as well. So in each of these zones, as we set up our time clock in our actual output system for the watering, we will be able to tune in the water appropriate for those plants that are planted, the proper amount of time and amount of water to apply at different times of the year. And we can be most efficient that way in our use of water and save water initially in your bill every month as well. So they do have the program here where you can get rebates on removing turf and installing those time clocks, and rebates on all of that will make it a very feasible thing for you to consider. So note that removing the lawn, as we mentioned, turf is going to use maybe 75% of the water that you apply to your property will be to water that grass or that turf. So we can reduce that size of turf and make a substantial difference in our amount of water that we use. So it's important that you do this zone by zone, that your irrigation system addresses each zone individually for that plant material that's planted. We don't want to mix plants in a zone. We don't want to mix irrigation systems in a zone. We want one type of output system and one type of plant material in a zone area. Okay, so in this design process, we want to consider then what our needs are in the landscape. What do we want to use our property for? Are we going to be outside a lot? Are we going to have an edible area? Do we entertain outdoors? What style is your architecture of your home, as I mentioned before, so that we can follow through with that design in the landscaping as well. So we look at the house, the patio, and the other hardscape features and try to follow through with a consistent design. Plant preferences, it may be that you have warm colored flowers in your garden or cool colored flowers. You might want to stick with that plan. Also considering the scent of flowers or the odor, maybe bad odor of plants in choosing your plant palette as well. Some folks have allergies and don't want to have a lot of extra scents around their garden. Texture is important. We're going to see a picture in a few minutes here, how we can increase the interest of that design by having more textures in our plant material. And taste, taste might be considering food or your style in your garden. I personally like to incorporate edibles into my landscape. So how much grass or turf area do you really need? Remember that children like to play on grass. It might be an area that you're using, actually, as we'll see in a minute here, for getting from one spot to another. It may be that you want to treat it as a place to entertain on that grass or turf area and it serve as an outdoor room. And outdoor rooms are just that. There are different sections in your garden that you've designed that are in of themselves, where they are a place to go to your own little private Idaho. You can have several outdoor rooms in your property, and they can be spots where, again, we have no turf. We have other water efficient plant materials and places to go. To consider a night lighting is an interesting thing. There's very efficient LED lighting now that's available for our landscaping that adds that special effect in our gardens. So through all of this, in your design, we want to consider the maintenance of this property. And will you be able to take care of it for the rest of your life? Will you be paying somebody to do it? So what kind of budget do you have for that? So when choosing trees, for example, we want to take a look at how big or how tall that tree will be at maturity. Will you be able to maintain it 5, 10 years from now? Or do you have to hire somebody to come in and pay them $1,000 a year to do it? So making those choices initially are very important down the road. So a landscape checklist here. Of course, we're always looking at ways to save water. So in planning our plant materials, thinking about using less water in whatever we do plant. We mentioned before the color of the plant material. We might want it to blend in what we have going on already in our landscape, or maybe a whole new palette. Since there's so many wonderful plants that we can utilize besides roses. There's Brunsfelsia, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Sweet olive that have wonderful scents that will entice your visitors that come to your home, as well as yourself. So again, flowers can be used. Cut flowers in your home are a delight as well. I like to consider that I'm providing habitat in my landscape for birds, butterflies, and other pollinators. They will help you in your garden, particularly if you have edibles. These pollinizers will help produce more food in your garden. So providing habitat for them, shelter, food, water for wildlife is important in this design as well. Areas to sit and enjoy and observe the wildlife, where you can enjoy it yourself is an important factor. As we said before, shade trees are a great factor. In fact, a shade tree planted on the south or west side of your home can provide shade to your home during the summertime that will cool your home perhaps 20 degrees cooler than it would be otherwise. So, and if you use a deciduous tree, then in the summertime, as it's leafed out, it provides shade. And then in the winter, as it loses its leaves, it will allow the sunlight to penetrate that tree and heat your roof up and heat your home as well. So it can seasonally, a tree can be utilized to reduce your energy use considerably. So consider that use of shade trees. The only drawback, of course, is that on a deciduous shade tree, you have to rake up those leaves. Potted plants are always fun, and in patio areas, for example, adding interest. Raised planters for flower gardens, for vegetable gardens, for herb gardens. You know, if you're going to plant a tree, the way I look at it is it might as well be something that's going to give back. So fruit trees of many different kinds that we can utilize. We have a wonderful climate in Southern California where it's, you know, never too cold for too long. It does get rather hot and cold where you live in Santa Clarita, but we can still utilize many fruit trees to great success. Rose gardens, as I said, are fun. And, you know, people think that roses are going to be a lot of extra work. As it turns out, they're really not. And they give so much and they take very little. Once established, their water use isn't that considerable. So if you have children or for yourself, a lawn to play, you know, dogs may want to have that area for play, but I think for a dog, having a dog run would make more sense. Notice here that Tim, my associate here, included a little railroad train. That's one of his hobbies. And so this is something that you might want to consider in your landscape, a railroad train. Okay. So we have a nice seating area here where we can enjoy the landscaping that we've done and the wildlife that we're bringing into the garden, and down here as well. So consider in this landscape design, as we mentioned, less grass or less turf. Here's a study that was done back in 2005, but still very relevant, where in a traditional landscape on the left, in a year, your average use of water to irrigate that property where you have turf and mixed plant materials, 57,000 gallons of water, and producing 670 pounds of yard waste and 80 hours of maintenance to achieve all of this. Whereas in a sustainable landscape where we have reduced our turf, we have installed efficient irrigation systems, we have plant materials that use less water, we're looking at 6,000 gallons of water annually, 250 pounds of yard waste, and maybe only as little as 15 hours of annual maintenance. So there's a considerable difference there in your savings, both in energy, water, time, and enjoying your property. So as we said, turf uses the most water. An average is about 3/4 of the water that you apply to your landscape goes to grass or turf. So high traffic areas would be an area to consider to utilize turf. We'll see some pictures here in a moment. But of course, most commonly, people are using that grass as an ornamental ground cover, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because other types of ground covers could be used that are much more efficient. So again, 75% of, well, in Santa Clarita Valley, 70% of the water that you use is used to irrigate that outside landscape. And again, as I said, turf grass uses maybe 3/4 of all of your residential water for turf. So reducing the turf reduces your water use. It's really common sense. And reducing that turf means less mowing, less fertilizing as well that go along with that, less waste that you're producing that goes to the landfill. Of course, hopefully nowadays that is being composted. So as mentioned before already about the lawn replacement program, and more information available for you at conserve.yours.scvwater.com, and you can achieve this great rebate. But be sure to go to that site first and make sure that you follow the steps. Don't jump in and do the work before you find out what you need to do to get your rebates. So here we show turf grass that's being used on a hillside. It doesn't make much sense. All the water that's being used to achieve this green grass area could instead be planted with a more drought tolerant ground cover. So although we do have turf down below here, that's a high impact area, gets more use and more traffic, this hillside really doesn't make much sense. So we want to be practical about it. And again, if we are using it as an ornamental ground cover, consider where and keeping that in a small space. Here shows some areas where maybe turf or grass could be used in small stripped areas, areas that are on slopes that we want to prevent erosion or runoff, so of wasting of the water and taking soil with it. So those could be planted. This is going to be a difficult area to mow. I don't know who's getting up there and mowing this. Also mentioned here would be perhaps under trees where we have roots that are surface roots that are an issue. Maybe wanting to use a turf grass that is for shade under those areas. I'm under the idea, though, that less turf is better in most all cases. All right. So choosing plants. Santa Clarita Valley, you tend to have a lot of wind. You have intense sun and heat, 100+ temperatures. Along with that, we have low humidity. You also get colder winters. Now, I live in the West Covina Walnut area. I don't have quite the intensity that you guys have in temperatures, but I get my share here. But you know, we are experiencing, along with all of this, global warming and a change in our climate. It's changing annually, and adjusting to that is difficult. For example, growing vegetables. When do you plant? We had a late freeze just last week that I wasn't expecting, and I lost a good portion of my crop that I'd started. So it's hard to calculate just when or what's going to happen. You got to be ready for anything. One thing that we are battling, I mentioned before, is most of us have heavy clay soils in our landscaped areas, and so it's generally pretty heavily compacted or compressed. We do have good quality water in Santa Clarita Valley, so it's very low salt, and that's a bonus. All right. So we have all of these factors to contend with when choosing plants and making sure that they can tolerate these conditions, particularly as intense they are in Santa Clarita. So as I mentioned before, how big will that plant be at maturity? And we can get this information online. Sunset Book has good information about how big a plant will be when it's mature. Considering in your landscape those microclimate areas that I was speaking of, the sun spots, the shade spots, and planting according to the needs of plants in those areas. Some plants may be better in containers. And here's a website here, santaclaritagardens.com, where you can find out more information about plants for your region. So we talk about this heavy clay soil that we have. And as I said, I find this throughout Southern California. Sandy soil is what we consider to be well-drained soil, and which has its downfalls as well, because it doesn't hold water and doesn't hold nutrients for plants. So if you have a heavy clay soil, we can amend it, we can lighten it up by the addition of compost. But I really think one of the better ways to go are raised beds, particularly if you're looking at a flower garden or an edible garden. Building up and getting a quality soil in that raised bed area will get you on the road to success. Clay soil tends to stay very wet, and if you overwater, then the roots of your plants can rot because of this wet condition, root disease, and failure of those plants. So it's important, if you're gardening in heavy clay soil, to water appropriately. You know, one of the simple things you can use is a little water meter that you can stick down into the ground about 8-9 inches and determine whether the soil is wet, dry, or too wet. And then you can adjust your watering accordingly. So choosing clay tolerant plants, and you'll find lists of these online and at the website here that the water company has, and also in your Sunset book, you'll find those plants that are more tolerant of heavier clay soils. But controlling water is the important part. Watering every day of the week is certainly not a good idea. Even twice a week in many cases is too much, depending on that soil and the plants that you're growing. I personally have trained many plants in my garden, especially my ornamental trees, shrubs, and fruit trees, that I can do deep watering every 2 to 3 weeks. And I have very great success with that, with a heavy clay soil as well. So, as I mentioned before, on your design that you're drawing, you want to draw your plants in, how they'll be at maturity, so that we can properly space them and don't overplant an area. You know, the first year you plant a plant, it sleeps. The second year it creeps. The third year it leaps. And so within 3 to 4 years, that plant may be at its mature size. So we want to certainly allow that spacing when we do our design and our planting, the height and the spread. Of course, we want to have the desired effect in an area. If we want it to fill in, of course, we want to calculate so that that area will be filled in with ground cover, for example. Erosion control, that ground cover is going to help hold that soil in place so we won't have runoff and taking soil with it. And of course, you need to have room to work in your garden. If it means getting in to do weeding or other types of pruning, we need to have space to get around in that garden as well. So allow space for maintenance. So you might consider more trees, as I mentioned. They can provide that shade, particularly on that south and west side of your property, to shade your home in the summer. Will lower your energy bills, increase your oxygen that's produced, and in the long run, your property value is increased by landscaping, particularly well-grown and mature trees. So again, the maintenance, you consider the size of that tree. How long can you maintain it and prune it, or will you have to pay somebody to do it? And then the cleanup of those leaves. Deciduous trees are the ones that are going to provide the cooling in the summer and heating in the winter to your roof and to your home, as much as a 20-degree difference. So many of you are in areas where there's issues with fire. And the terminology, of course, are synonymous here. Firewise landscaping, firewise gardening, or fire-safe landscaping, all mean the same thing. It means having a defensible area around your home with a 30-foot minimum space. In between large trees, they're talking about a 30-foot spacing between large trees so that fire can't spread from one to the other. Smaller shrubs, a 15-foot distance between smaller shrubs so that the fire can't spread from one to the other. So keeping this defensible space and keeping these ideas in mind, you can have a safe property. Choosing plant materials that have don't provide the fuel and cannot burn as well is the other important thing. There's a lot of information and research on this. I have a book right here on firescaping and written by an associate of mine. So there's a lot of information out there. If you're in that area, be sure to take heed. So a good landscape design is one that is maintainable, sustainable, this whole idea of something that will be here for the future and not take more than it gives. Something that's realistic and not too crazy, but that can be fun too. And efficient in its water use, and maybe if it's a food garden and what it produces for you. Does it meet your needs now and into the future? Will you be able to maintain it in the future? And will it provide for you everything that you wanted in your design? So here we can see we've added texture to the garden, as well as scale and different size plants, color, and variety. It adds interest rather than just one ground cover covering an entire area, or turf covering an entire area, which can be a bit boring. Mixing things up, adding these textures, colors, and variety, and different size plants will add more interest to your garden landscape. So low growing plants in the front, taller plants in the back, that's a pretty given thing. Making sure that for areas where we have irrigation, that we have lower growing plants around them that won't impede the water spray, whether that be a turf area, ground cover area, what it may be. We don't want the plants to interfere with the spraying of the water or application of the water. Plants in landscape should be planted in odd numbers, 3, 5s, and 7s in groupings. Likewise, if you're using containers or pots on your patio, they should be placed in odd numbers, 3, 5s, and 7s. It just gives better eye appeal. In small areas, use fine textured plants. It'll make the space look bigger. Bright colored plants warm an area. Cool colored plants are more recede and give a cool. Dark colored plants give a cooler type of appearance in that area. So here's some views of some plans and projects that were done. On the left is a before shot. And then on the right here, you see the design that they have done, a very simple design. And then you'll see the finished completed project here, where they've taken out the turf and they have drought tolerant plants and they've applied mulch. Now this is something we haven't mentioned yet, but mulch to those open spaced areas will help conserve water. It reduces evaporation of water from the soil, and then your plants are much happier. You're using less water overall. Here's a before shot, little corner lot here. Here's their design and their key with their plant materials. And here is the completed project. Much different than it was. As you can see, it's a minimalist design, very low water use. In fact, once these plants are established, they probably don't have to apply any water at all to many of these plants in the landscape. The rainfall would provide for these. So very low labor, no turf anymore, easy to care for, low water use, low maintenance. Here's a before shot of a front yard, and notice that they have some heavy shade in this area over here, probably the neighbor's tree. So I love this design that was done. And notice they're using a golden currant and white chaparral currant. Those are plants that can take the shade in this region over here. And then the other plants here that are stated. So let's take a look at their installation. This was immediately after it was done and kind of minimalist looking. But as we go forward then, 1 year later, it has filled in considerably. And they are using mulch in these open spaced areas in here to help maintain and conserve water. So this still would look best in probably 3 years, will look its very best. And low maintenance, low water use, easy care. Here's another before shot and the plan with a dry creek bed running through it. And here we have immediately afterwards, and here we have 8 months later. The plants have grown up, and you can see in 3 years it will be filled in even more. These are low water use plants. They've installed a proper irrigation system. They've zoned their plants off according to the water needs, and they're running free. So here we are. We have made it to the end here, and we're open for any questions that you might have. Laura, should I go ahead and stop this share here, I think? Of course, you have this website you can go to for more help, and you have several websites that can assist you.
Great. So we do have a few questions. We have a question regarding topography. How detailed or scale?
As far as topography showing like hillsides and so on, you can indicate on your plan where that slope is, but you don't really need to show it in your design. We're looking at a bird's eye view. We're not looking at a straight on view. Those really don't help us with our plantings and our work we need to do in the project. So we want that bird's eye view, and you can indicate on the plan that it's a slope. You might indicate what the angle of the slope is as well on your plan, especially for contractors and doing any bidding on the work, for example.
Okay, and then there's another question regarding night lighting. Isn't that harmful or deterrent for night pollinators?
You know, you're absolutely right. There's a big movement, but especially, you know, more so, I think, with the concept of cities and lit buildings and confusing birds in their flight patterns. As far as night pollinators, you know, I hadn't really thought of that before, but that's a good point, and that's something I'm going to look into. As far as the night pollinating moths and so on, whether the lighting would throw them off, I'm going to have to look into that. I don't know offhand.
Okay, and then somebody asked about the presentation. It is available. It will be available. The recording of the presentation will be available on our website in about a week. But if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I can send you a PDF file, and you can email me at lgallegos@scvwater.org, and then I'll send that over to you. Okay, so another question for you, Steve, is how do you trace an existing irrigation line? My predecessor put in a future line, but didn't finish it out.
So if you want to, for example, if you have a hard line in that was originally meant for overhead spray systems, we can convert that into a drip irrigation system very easily. There's devices that we can get that we can replace the upright spray head that we had with a device that has a built-in pressure reducer, a filter, and 8 outlets that we can run from that to 8 different plant materials in our garden. The thing is, you would have to do that entire zone or line of that irrigation system would have to all be drip irrigation. We can't mix on one zone line different types of irrigating. So it would all have to be converted to drip, and we all have to have the pressure reducer and the filter on those. But these conversions can be done fairly easily.
Okay. Somebody said, how do I apply for rebates? So you apply for rebates on our SCV Water website. Go to rebates. So you're more than welcome to do it that way. Somebody asked, how does mulch work with fire safety or termites?
Okay, so with termites, there's no concern. They've done a lot of research and found that mulch does not provide a habitat for termites. So that's off the table. But fire, the risk is fairly low in that you're hopefully are irrigating, and the area where the mulch is applied, the soil underneath is moist, and there's moisture to the mulch itself. But I'm sure that there is somewhat of a risk, particularly in the high fire areas, and we'd want to take a look at that as to what type of mulch you're using and where and how it's applied. There's probably restrictions Like where I live, I don't have fire risk, so it's not a problem. But if you do, I don't think you would want it applied in areas up to the house and so on. I'm sure that would be addressed in a book, which again is something I'm going to look at here. But mulch has such great benefits. If you're not in a fire zone area, mulch will save so much water from your soil, and the roots of your plants will extend in these areas underneath the mulch, and then they will be provided with a nice moist environment throughout the year as well. It puts less hardship on your plants if they have consistent moisture year round.
Okay.
And mulch looks good too. It looks good.
Okay, next question is, are there low growing grass substitutes that work here?
There are. There's, for example, there's a ground cover that's a Diamondia is one of them that has been used, very, very low growing. And there are a few others as well. I'm trying to think here. Carapia is one that has been used extensively throughout Southern California now, and it's very popular as well. Carapia is can be kept short or it can be allowed to grow taller, whereas the Diamondia is very, very short.
Okay. Do you have a landscape company that works with you, or would you recommend someone who can help us with the plan for our property?
So there are landscape companies out there, and you know, oftentimes getting a referral from someone that you know that has used a company. Another resource may be at your local nursery. Perhaps they have a list of contractors in your area. I don't know that you, with the water division here, if you have referrals or not, but word of mouth is oftentimes the best way, or somebody that you know has had a beautiful landscape that you like, or a neighbor, find out who they used.
Yeah, I would recommend going to our website to the conserve part of it, and you can probably see a list of people, but I don't believe we give any direct referrals.
Right.
Okay, next question is, what would be the best way of getting rid of the grass without having to use chemicals?
There's lots of different ways. In fact, earlier I was talking about this mulch, this lasagna layering mulching that we can do. In the hottest part of the summer is one of the best times to remove your turf. So we have this turf area. We can water it very heavily. We want to mow it very short. We then come in and we start layering it with newspaper, cardboard, and then layers of mulch. And then we want to water this in and then let it sit there through the hottest months of the summer for, you know, maybe 2 months, June, July, let's say, July, August. And then this is going to smother that grass turf that's growing underneath. It doesn't have any light at that point, and it's going to die from loss of light. And at the end of that time, we can come in and simply poke holes or cut holes into that mulch business in the paper or cardboard and replant our new plants. So it sets you up ready to go. The soil would be conditioned at that point in time, and you've killed your grass off. Now, there's other ways. We can come in and physically remove the turf, scrape it off, dig down, remove the roots, and remove it that way. We don't recommend anymore the use of chemicals like Roundup. That's gone by the wayside pretty much. So we're looking at ways that are better for the environment instead.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly add that is part of our lawn replacement program. We do have a sheet mulching program while you remove your grass and you add nutrients back into the soil. So that is part of the program, and you do get money for doing that. And then really quickly, I did hop on our website. We do have a pre-screened list of folks that we work with to create a design. So hop on our website, yeah.
There you go. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, I'd like to do this now versus in the fall. Is this okay given that temperatures are starting to heat up?
You can remove turf now and plan for planting, but no, it's start getting too hot. I would rather wait till the fall to do your planting. So you spend this time to do your design work, to do your excavation, removing turf, updating, installing irrigation systems, so that when the fall is here, you're all ready to go. Especially where you're at, you guys have temperatures that are well over 100 degrees in the summer. New plantings can fail under those conditions.
That's a great tip, because I was going to start adding my stuff back in.
Yeah, it's still, we still are in winter, spring, and there's certain things that can get established. But again, your better time is fall into winter. Our winters are very mild here typically. We can plant fall into winter and be ready for the next spring.
Okay. Who can help with planning for erosion and drainage issues on a lot with the steep slope?
So there you have an issue with runoff and taking the soil with it. And that's where planting materials can be useful because their roots will hold together that hillside. So that's depending on the size and what your project is. And again, I don't like on a hillside planting or any kind of planting what we call a monoculture. You don't want to take that hillside and plant just one ground cover of the entire thing. It should be a mixed planting. There'll be more interest. And of course, we have to add an irrigation system to get those plants going. But if we use California friendly, California native plants in particular, after the plants are established and they have developed their strong root system, then the watering will be minimal and the hillside can be held in place.
Okay. Somebody asked if the rebates work for the backyard. Yes, they do work for the backyard. They're very flexible. I believe the minimum now for a project is 100 square feet. So you can do it in phases. You don't have to do it all at once. But yeah, definitely check out our new lawn replacement program. Do you recommend rock mulch around a high fire area?
So yeah, rock mulch would probably be a better choice rather than a wood mulch in the fire zone area. Absolutely. And it's going to still serve the purpose of helping to conserve moisture in the soil. And of course, a big factor with mulch is that it reduces your weeds and your labor pulling weeds. And that to me is one of the biggest factors.
Okay. What kind of soil to use to refill the soil in your bed plants?
So, if you go to a soil purveyor and a landscape supplier, and in your region, offhand, I don't know who that might be, but we have several companies out here that supply landscape products in bulk. And they have mixes that are designed for raised beds. And it is usually a topsoil and compost mix. There's also, if you have a smaller size bed, you can find bales of products available at your local big box. I know that I just saw a talk by Kellogg's the other day, and they make bales of raised bed material just specifically for that.
What are your thoughts? Sorry. What are your thoughts on artificial turf?
I hate it. There's a lot of drawbacks to it. One, it's going to be very hot. It's not going to allow the soil underneath to really improve. It's really preventing oxygen to the soil and any roots for trees that are there. It has a life of maybe 10 years and it's going to rot away and then it has to be disposed of. So for these reasons, it's not my favorite thing to do, but personal choice.
Okay, somebody asked, when watering grass, how often and length of time to do it?
And again, there's a lot of variables involved. What type of soil do you have? What time of year is it? What type of grass? And all these factors then come into play. And how have you been watering all along? And how much water has that grass been getting? See, the idea of watering a grass properly is that if we do it the right way, we can develop a deep root system. If we water too often, the grass is going to have a very shallow root system. With a deeper root system, then the grass can actually hold up under heat conditions much better because it can achieve and draw from the water that's down deeper. So how often do we water? There is no set time except that in the wintertime, if it's raining, typically one time a week to none or less, and then it might be every 2 weeks. In the spring and summer, as it's warming up, it may be twice a week spring, and then possibly 3 times a week in the hottest part of the summer. So it all depends on all these different variables and what type of soil, what type of lawn that you're dealing with.
What is the best way to get rid of insects in your indoor plants?
Are you speaking of things like fungus gnats that are flying around the soil areas? If so, That's exactly what it is. They're called fungus gnats, and I've had other questions about this just yesterday. There's actually a product out there that can be purchased, and eBay is a good place to get it because you can get a small container, and it's called Natrol, Gnatrol, Natrol, and it is an organic control. It's a Bacillus thuringiensis product. That's if you have the what I'm assuming to be your problem, the fungus gnats. Now, if you have other issues on the plants themselves, sometimes just taking a little Q-tip with a little rubbing alcohol, we can wipe off these pests that may be on your plant itself. So depending on what your issue is.
Okay. Somebody said my neighborhood has very high rock content in a very thin soil profile. Do you recommend sieving out the rocks where possible?
You know, here's what happens when you remove rocks. Next year you have more. They tend to float up to the surface. In areas here where I live up near the foothills, similar problems. People have rockier soils, and you'll have them forever because they keep working their way up. They don't go away.
Okay, I have a lemon tree, or I have had a lemon tree for 5 years planted on the ground, but it's not flowering. What do I do?
Not flowering? Well, you know, lemon trees usually are going to be productive within about 5 years. Oranges take maybe 8. So have you fertilized that tree? If not, now's the time to do it. So there is citrus fertilizer out there, or very simply, we can use chicken manure, which is high nitrogen, works well. But if you buy a balanced citrus fertilizer and apply that maybe 3 times right now, and again in 4 to 6 weeks, and then one more time 4 to 6 weeks later, 3 applications, 4 to 6 weeks apart, here in late winter, early spring, and you may have improved results. Now, the other thing that we can do for our fruit trees is give them what are called micronutrients. So there's a couple products out there. Rock dust would be one, or azomite would be the other, that can provide those micronutrients that would improve the overall growth and the flavor of your fruit as well.
Okay, somebody asked, do you provide service here?
I live in West Covina, Walnut, and I don't get out that way much. I used to come out here to do these talks in person, but they're all done on Zoom now. So no, I don't go out that way. In fact, I teach classes personally. I teach at Mount San Antonio College, and I'm teaching just 3 classes right now. But through this COVID, we were teaching about 11 classes online, and now we're 2 online, and we have 8 classes in person in this region here.
Wow.
So I do teach free classes online in home gardening through Mount San Antonio College.
Very cool. Somebody asked, is rock mulch just rock?
Rock dust is from a quarry. A rock mulch is that it's rocks. It's and it comes in different sizes, of course. And sometimes using the smaller size is more of an attractive situation. I personally like the use of rocks and boulders in the landscape just as an interest sake as well. But it would certainly be the appropriate thing to use in a fire area. And there's different size rock available.
Okay, somebody asked, what kind of grass is best for full day sun in backyard with no shade?
Oh boy. Yeah, no, with no shade, full sun. Well, you know, if you're looking at something that, of course, is going to give you green year round, of course, we're always looking at the marathons, but they can be a little difficult with the heat. St. Augustine is going to look good in the summertime, and it's in the wintertime, it's going to go dormant. But it can take the heat pretty well. There are some other grass turfs that have been developed by some companies that have trade names that are lower in water use, develop deep root systems, and offhand, I couldn't tell you the names of those. There's a couple companies that have developed products. So a professional would have access to these particular products. Turfs that are designed for that very reason. There's about 2 of them that are out there, and again, I don't know the names of them offhand. I don't deal with a lot of turf. I really try to stay away from turf.
Okay, what can you do to make a sago plant grow fast?
What was that again?
What can you do to make a sago plant grow fast?
A sago palm. Sago palms grow 1 inch a year. That's it. That's as fast as they grow. If that's what you're speaking of. Sagos are 1 inch a year. Note that they are also poisonous, that if you have a dog that likes to chew plants, don't let them have access to that sago palm because they are poisonous.
Okay, last questions. Have you ever used fine ground basalt as a soil nutrient?
Fine ground what?
Basalt?
I'm still not understanding that again.
Ground basalt.
Oh. No, I have to say I'm not, because I don't know what it is.
Okay.
So I haven't.
Somebody said is okay, next question. My papaya tree is in a pot, was almost going to fruit, but all the leaves were lost during the winter time. Will the papaya tree still live?
Maybe. Subtropical fruits in frost don't go together very well. And I know the last week, as I said, we had that frost. It certainly hit hard. It may recover. You won't know for a while. You'll have to wait and see. But it could very well recover. Because we didn't have an extended period of frost. It was just, 2 nights, I think, myself. And good chance it will recover.
Okay, so I guess the question about the fine ground is a igneous rock?
Say that again, Laura?
An igneous rock?
I still don't understand it, sorry.
Okay. Is there any proven result of reducing gopher activity by removing turf, native plants in landscaping?
So you're saying gophers?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm fighting gophers myself. And we have raised beds. And if you're building if you know you have gophers and you're putting in a raised bed, then you want to be sure to put gopher screen down. And if you do that properly, you will be able to grow in that bed without having any issues at all. If you happen to get a hole in that gopher screen down at the bottom, or there's some way they have access, then it's all over again. So gopher screen will really handle the problem very efficiently. And if you have a raised bed, what we had to do is we had to actually remove the soil from our raised beds, put the screen down, and put the soil back, and it's corrected the problem.
Okay. So we're getting questions about passion fruit and plants that next month we will be having a class for growing your own plants that produce food and stuff. So if you would like to join us for that class, that'll be on April 5th. Please sign up, and we will go into more in depth for plants.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, so that we can cover those topics specifically.
Yeah. Somebody just asked, last question, is Epsom salt good for plants? If so, how to use it?
That's an interesting point here. I used to promote its use, but then I find out that in using it, it may be overuse. So it's important to really think about it. One of the things it can do, of course, is supposed to help your roses get new growth and flower better, but it can be used, it can be too much. And so testing your soil is really an important thing to do before we start applying a lot of extra nutrients. And so soil testing can be done. There's a couple of laboratories in Southern California where you can send a sample in for about $60 and get a full lineup of your nutrients. Or you can do a home test that will just test for your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and will give you a shortened version before you start applying anything. So I wouldn't just do it willy-nilly.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. That is it. We did have a few more questions, but I think that's enough for today. Thank you so much. We appreciate you hopping on. Will you be teaching our class next month as well?
No, I'm not doing that one. I'm actually doing a class in Orange County for the Master Gardeners that day. So I'm also a Master Gardener. So I will not be, and I'm sorry, but I don't think, let's see here. Let me make sure. I might be speaking wrong. What is the date of that one? That's on the 2nd. Maybe I am doing it. As a matter of fact, I was looking at a different date. So it's on the 2nd, right? April 2nd?
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke.
Not the 5th. Yeah, so I was looking at the 5th. On 5th, I'm busy, but I am actually doing the one on vegetable gardening. And that will be on edibles at that time, and that is one of my stronger topics. So all your questions, problems about growing and pests and watering of your vegetables, we'll be able to answer those for you at that time.
Great, thank you so much. Again, sorry for the wrong date. It's April 2nd.
Right. Great.
Everybody have a beautiful day. Enjoy a cloudy Saturday.
Yeah. All right. See you next time, guys.